Hi friends, I'm Sincerely Unique. Today we're having another Final Fantasy XIV discussion video. My static finally cleared Pandaemonium Abyssos Savage last week after 4 grueling months of prog. I've been thinking about the tier since then and I want to gather my thoughts here. Before we get to talking about my experience with Abyssos, I need to talk about what happened leading up to me starting the tier. Ever since Eden's Promise, when I first started raiding, I've been a bit cursed, such that I never last more than one whole Savage tier with a static. I was hoping that I would stick around with the group I cleared Asphodelos with, but I left that static the very weekend before Abyssos Savage was supposed to even drop. That weekend was probably one of my lowest points as a Final Fantasy XIV player, not only because I was out of a static right when the Savage tier was supposed to drop, but I got ousted from the very same friend group I started this game with and had been with for 2 years. I was not doing the best mentally and just felt lost and alone. I explained the situation to a friend and she invited me to join her static, which happened to be in need of a DPS. Thanks to Data Center Travel releasing a month before, our group was able to meet on Primal with the goal of clearing the tier in a couple of months. It felt almost like fate to have met this group because we pretty much hit it off immediately and stuck together well through the tier. We cleared P5S in 3 nights over 1 week. This is probably my favorite fight of the tier. It's cursed with body checks like many of the other fights, but the mechanics and what's expected of you are very reasonable for a first floor boss. This was my first time doing high-end content as Black Mage since Eden's Promise, and I had a lot of fun learning how to play well in this fight. Obviously, Devourer memes are real, but this fight teaches you a lot of raiding fundamentals like partners, light parties, maintaining your rotation, performing reopeners when the boss is targetable again. It was a good experience. My group took 2 nights over 1 week to clear P6S. Hegemony Savage is the fight of the tier I usually do well on, and it's because there really isn't a lot going on in this fight in general. The boss kinda just floats there, and there are back-to-back mechanics where you either handle it one way or handle it the other way. The most difficult mechanic for me as a Black Mage was actually looking all the way to the middle of the room when the boss was casting Chorus Ixo and making sure I didn't get clipped. This fight isn't very exciting, but you have to know how to handle each variation of the mechanics, which sadly there is only 2 variations of to handle usually. To be honest, I blasted through this fight so much that I pretty much forget what mechanic I'm on every time the boss casts something until I actually see what's happening during re-clears. My group took a bit longer to clear the higher floors of the tier. We took 4 nights to clear P7S over 2 weeks. We only took longer to clear this fight because not only did we have to re-clear the previous 2 floors for loot, but it took us 8 minutes of pull to practice the harvest mechanics at the end of the fight. I don't like longer encounters like this fight, and we usually were cutting very close to Enrage in our first few clears. The first 75% of the fight is simple enough to understand, but having a double caster party composition made meeting the DPS check somewhat concerning. I actually thought it was so infuriating that people called the DPS check for this fight a joke when it's actually something to be concerned over even with item level 630 gear. This floor was certainly not my least favorite of Abyssos, but it's definitely not something to write home about either. P8S is a static killer. I've known so many groups who could not meet the consistency check required for both phases of this fight. The difficulty jump to this floor from the 7th is absolutely ridiculous. My group took 10 nights over 5 weeks just to clear the first phase of this fight. Back-to-back body checks with very little time to recover makes the first phase of this fight absolutely painful to re-clear. Door bosses have become a common complaint in the community since, as of now, you need to clear them every single time you want to clear the second phase of a fight. Of a final floor fight. I think the mechanics in this fight are reasonable enough to handle, but this fight was just way too much of a jump in difficulty after P7S, only because of the sheer volume of mechanics that start by checking if everyone in your party is even alive. Someone's run or the whole party's run can be easily ruined by mistakes in this fight, and that's just irritating. This is probably my least favorite fight in Abyssos because of that reason. It's no wonder that so many statics have broken up and people have had so much burnout from raiding because of this cursed fight. Phase 2 is definitely a final fight of a tier. The music's good, the damage going out is insane, and the damage expected to come from everyone is high as well. It took me a very long time to understand how to deal with every variation of the mechanics. It got to the point where in my first clear video you can hear me talking to myself because that was the best way for me to stay constantly engaged with the fight mechanics. Once again, this fight has so many body checks, and recovery from deaths for a significant portion of the fight is impossible. I actually didn't get my first clear with my static. I got my first clear in Party Finder because my static was done raiding for that week, and I really wanted to learn and clear the fight for myself. It took me 2 months to finally clear P8S Phase 2, and my static cleared as a group 2 weeks later, making it about 2.5 months for us in total to clear P8S Phase 2, and about 3.5 months in total to clear the P8S in general. This fight has plenty of mechanics where you understand what to do, but the execution is very strict because you should know what to do. The timer is in high concept, and the ridiculously early snapshots in natural alignment are the perfect examples of this expectation. So now my statics cleared the tier, and we will be running re-clears probably until the tier loot is unlocked. We actually lost a healer right when we were about to clear P8S, but I'm very proud of my statics ability to stay committed and improve as raiders. The next Savage tier is actually only 4 months away, so we already have that to sort of think about. I still might be cursed and might end up in a completely different group by the time Tartarus comes out, but I will always be grateful for the experience I had clearing this tier with my current static. I want to thank them for having me. They hold themselves to a much higher standard for rating that aligns close to me. They are way more comfortable with each other, less overly sensitive, much more communicative of their thoughts to me as we've been progressing the tier than my old group ever was. When I felt lost and alone right when Abyssos was coming out, they welcomed me with open arms, and I'll never forget that. Okay, I've been talking for long enough. Let me know what your experience with Abyssos was like in the comments section below. Did you clear the tier? Did your static take a break or disband? Did you have any plans to clear Tartarus in May? I know this is all just a game, but the interactions you have with people in Final Fantasy XIV are real, and that's something everyone should keep in mind. Alright, bye friends.